So you might remember seeing a chart just like number 54 when we did it in class and we discussed the properties of the quadrilaterals that we learned about. So we're pretty much just going to complete this chart just like we did in class. We're going to check off in the boxes if this quadrilateral has this property. Opposite sides are congruent goes for all parallelograms. So if it is a parallelogram, it has this property. A rectangle is a parallelogram, a square is a parallelogram, and a rhombus is a parallelogram. They are all types of parallelograms. They all have that property. A trapezoid, however, does not have both pairs of opposite sides congruent. Only one pair of opposite sides are parallel is a characteristic specifically to a trapezoid. It is what makes it different from all of the other types of parallelograms. So only trapezoids have only one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. Opposite angles that are congruent is also another characteristic of all parallelograms. So rectangles have this property, squares and rhombuses do also. Each diagonal forms two congruent triangles. That is also a property of all parallelograms. So that goes for rectangles, squares, and rhombuses. Diagonals bisect each other. You might remember this from coordinate geometry. That is also a property of all parallelograms. So rectangles, squares, and rhombuses have it as well. The diagonals are congruent. Now this was not true for all parallelograms. It was true for a specific parallelogram. And specifically, it went with the rectangle. If it is a rectangle, if it's true for a rectangle, it's true for all types of rectangles, and a square is also a type of rectangle. So it goes for square as well. Diagonals are perpendicular was specific to rhombuses. And once again, all types of rhombuses, which include squares. The diagonal bisects two angles is true for squares because it is a property of rhombuses. All the angles are right. You probably remember that from a long time ago. And that goes for rectangles and squares. And all the sides are congruent to one another. That's true for rhombuses, which also makes it true for a square. So as you see, a square inherits all of the characteristics of rhombuses and rectangles. Moving on to 55, we enter our truth tables and trying to figure out truth values. Now, there were several rules that we had learned. I'm going to summarize them over here. We had learned that if you have true and true, you get a true value. If it is not this instance and it's using the and symbol, then it is false. If you had false or false, then you got a false value. If it is not both false and you're using the or symbol, then the answer is not false. If you have true, arrow, false, so you're looking at the arrow statement, the conditional, if you have T, arrow, F, you get an F. If the T is not first, if the T is second, then it is not false. These are the rules for all of the logic statements. When you go to the double arrow, they have to be the same. So T double arrow T is T, or F double arrow F is also T. Okay? We're going to use those rules to complete this truth table. So in this truth table, the first column asks us to find the opposite of P. So we go to the P column and we take the opposite of all of their values. The opposite of T is false. The opposite of T is false. The opposite of false is T. The opposite of false is T. All right, to evaluate the next column, we're looking at the P, arrow, Q. So this column first, then this column. Our rule for the arrow says if we have T, arrow, F, then we get F. So T, arrow, T does not match that rule, so it is not false, it's true. T, arrow, F does that match that rule, so that follows the rule and becomes false. F, arrow, T does not match the rule, so therefore it's true. F, arrow, F does not match the rule, so therefore it's true. When we move on to the AND statement, we're looking for an instance where they're both true, T and T. That will give us the true value. So we have T and T, that is true. T and F does not match the rule, so it's false. F and T does not match the rule. F and F does not match the rule. Finally, the OR column, we're looking for the false or false equals false. So I'm going to look down. We have T or T, T or F, F or T, F or F. F or F is the one that matches the rule, which is false. If it doesn't match the rule, as is the first 3 lines, then it has to be true. For number 56, we have to complete this truth table. So this is our last statement that we have to have parts of in all of these columns. I'm going to kind of break it down, just starting at the innermost parentheses and working my way out. To evaluate this statement, I need a not Q column. So I'm going to have to give myself a not Q column. Now that I have a not Q column, I can evaluate P and not Q. So I can give that a column. I've got this part from the inside. Now let me work on this parentheses, which is P and not Q. I have that whole thing. Or Q. And I have that whole column, so I can put that here. And finally, I can evaluate the entire statement. So let me fill in the values. All right, not Q, I'm taking the opposite of all the Q values, so this becomes false, this becomes true, this becomes false, this becomes true. To do P and not Q, so P and the not Q column, I'm looking for the case where they are both true. They are not both true, they are both true, they are not both true, and they are not both true. So all the rest don't follow the rule and they're all false. To do this column, I'm looking at this column or the Q column. And the OR rule says I'm looking for where they are both false. So they are not both false, they are not both false, they are not both false. At the very end, they are both false. That's the one that's false. All the rest have to be true. All right, finally, the last column is asking me to assess these values with the P values and connecting with the arrow. Now, the whole problem with the arrow is that it matters where the T is. The T has to be first with the arrow. So I've got to look at this column first and this column second because the T has to be in front of the arrow. So this is T, arrow, T. That's okay. T, arrow, T. That's okay. T, arrow, F. That's my rule. That's false. And F, arrow, F. That's okay too. So all the rest are true.